Hello everyone, this is 200,000 units and today I have a retrospective review of 3050 Clone Trooper Hawkbat Battalion. Now this figure was originally released by Hasbro in the 30th anniversary collection line. It's based on a Clone Trooper, or well, a couple of Clone Troopers we see for about 4 seconds in the first episode of the Clone Wars micro series, fighting on a muddy battlefield in the rain with these sort of ponchos. They are a bit of a fan favourite, and I suspect this is probably how this figure came about. In terms of aftermarket prices, I picked this guy up for £17. He's not sort of massively expensive. Though one of the rarer figures, he doesn't appear too much as a new listing. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say, just in terms of general background, so let's dive into the review. So for starters, we'll take a look at the sculpt of the figure. However, to do that, we'll have to remove the poncho, so I'll talk a bit about that first. It is a single piece soft goods item. It's actually very nicely made. It's a nice fabric. A couple of mock applications on the front and on the back, just on the lower areas on the back, so you can distinguish between front and back. And as you can see, we've also got stitch marks here and here. Now, if I take off the poncho like so, you can see that what Hasbro have actually done is stitched the outer bits of the fabric inwards to get a nice kind of rectangular shape. Honestly, I think this is a really clever idea, and it's a very effective application of soft goods because it means the outer edges have a bit more weight, so they hang more properly over the figure. So instead of billowing out, it's a much nicer look. And I think this really works. This is a really effective method of doing this. Just put the figure's head and helmet back on. So this is based on the ROTS Evolutions Phase 1 mold, and fairly standard paint application. Is very similar to the original one, but cleaner. You've got the helmet, which is removable, as you saw, and another interpretation of the looks a bit like a cross between Brodie Taylor and Tamura Morrison, if I'm honest. Not a bad sculpt overall, and a removable helmet. This isn't the greatest helmet sculpt I've ever seen. As you can see, it looks a little squished, and that continues when you put it onto the figure. Sculpt overall, though, fairly standard for a 2005 to 2010 era clone. In terms of paint applications, it's plain white. They've filled in the details on the belt in grey, but the main draw is the mud application on his shins and, well, some areas of the upper legs and boots. They've gone for quite an animated look here, which I like. I think it's nice. It's in style with the animated series, and I think it's a nice hallmark back to that, though I can appreciate that some people would probably have preferred a slightly more realistic weathering style, with a bit of a wash, etc. The helmet is fairly standard detailing, though I will point out it is missing the black stripe that has not been painted in, though because of the molded line, it's quite thick, so it kind of looks like the stripe is there, but it isn't. Moving on to articulation, standard for this kind of mold, for the arms to go up, rotate 360 degrees at the elbows. Mine's a little stiff, but yeah, 90 degrees like so. Wrists are swivels. Trigger finger here, well, trigger on both fingers. It's worth pointing out that the hands are very tough and don't flex well. No waist articulation, surprisingly, which is unfortunate because by this time Hasbro had used the Phase 2 Evolutions mold on the Clone Combat Engineer and 7th Legion figure. I think this would have been a better mold to get the waist articulation, even if the belt probably would have been assembled upside down. Legs It goes up to about here and to about there, maybe a little more if you're prepared to bend it, but I won't push it. Knees, standard 90-degree articulation. You could almost pose them into a kneeling position, and then these, of course, rotate all the way around onto the ankle joints, go back, and then rotate all the way around. As for forwards articulation, there is basically none. As you can see, the upper band on the boot prevents any movement there, which isn't great, but it's not bad. So overall, looking at the sculpt and articulation, it's not bad, standard. Maybe not great. I would have preferred them to have used a slightly different sculpt. I'll just put the cloak back on, then we'll talk about his accessory. It's also worth noting that the helmet is quite tight, and I have pulled off the head on at least one occasion. Just bear that in mind, nothing too serious. And as you can see, the cloak or the cape hangs nicely over the shoulders, not too billowy, not even around the back. And as you can see, it's a nice fit overall. So looking at the weapon, DC-15 blaster rifle using the Evolutions mold again, molded in a shiny silver. So this is the second iteration of the blaster rifle. I'm not a massive fan of this version. It's again based off the prop gun that isn't actually used in the films, but that's a whole nother discussion. Particularly the scope is quite flimsy, as you can see. Mine's already slightly bent from posing it in this guy's hands, mainly because they're so tight, but it is also worth mentioning that it is a good fit in the hands overall. Maybe a little loose, but not bad. But that is it in terms of articulations, really. Accessories. I've already covered the poncho and the helmet. So yes, that is pretty much all there is to this figure, really. So I will move on to my final thoughts. Now, just because I thought it would be cool to see, here is the Hawkbat Trooper next to 2008's General Kenobi in Clone Trooper armor. They're both sort of soft goods caped clones, kind of. And I thought it'd be nice to pose them together. As you can see, the fabrics making up the soft goods are slightly different on each figure. Kenobi has a slightly darker brown compared to the Hawkbat Trooper's more reddish tones. Another disparity is the helmet sizes. As you can see, Kenobi's is too wide and the Hawkbat Trooper's is too thin. So you'll have to contend with that if you're displaying them together. But overall, I don't think they're a bad choice to display with each other, even if they did, as far as I'm aware, never meet with each other on screen. So my final thoughts on this figure are as follows. I'm always a big fan of seeing micro series stuff, and this was a nice pick in my opinion. Something a bit nicer than the standard clone. We get the lovely poncho that is a really, really good application of soft goods in my opinion. However, I would have liked to see Hasbro use a slightly better mold. We know they had access to one at the time, so it's a bit of a shame in that regards. As for picking it up today, it's not a bad addition to anyone's collection. If you can score it for about £15 or so, I'd say that's a good deal for it. Looks nice on your shelf, pretty unique. Maybe get a second one, set them up nicely, even if they can't do the most dynamic of action poses, just due to the slightly limited articulation. But other than that, not a bad figure. Yeah, so thank you for watching and goodbye.